Media Narratives. I'm George Samuel here, and it is now time for, yes, the Thursday night live stream. Welcome everyone who has joined me. I really appreciate that. And there's a number of topics that I need to get to. I hope I'll be able to do it all in time. So I want to get into it right away. I see somebody has already mentioned Vance, but I want to get on to J.D. Vance's interview with Joe Rogan in a minute. But I want to start off with the U.S. State Department's announcement the other day that it will be bankrolling a variety of organizations and institutions in the EU, promoting the values of freedom, values of civilization, the values of human dignity, and very much opposed to the spirit of the EU. Now, this, of course, is nothing new, because if you recall, the Trump administration's national security strategy from last year, they'd made clear that that they intend to promote those forces in Europe that were opposed to the establishment, the elites of Europe. And this is part of the national security strategy. And then, if you recall, right towards the end of last year, about December of 2025, the United States imposed sanctions against a variety of EU figures deemed to be opposed to freedom. Now, of course, we do know that the institutions of the EU are profoundly antithetical to freedom. We know about the Digital Services Act. We know all about the crackdowns on social media, and their fining of Elon Musk and so on. And this is now clearly the norm, and indeed the way everything is now heading in the EU, with digital IDs, with needing to establish some kind of proof of identity in order to get on the social media, that this clearly is the EU is becoming an entity that's wholly antithetical and inimical to political freedom. And so this was the announcement from the State Department, and this is a $5 million grant. And here we go. This is the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, and that's a DRL. That's that Department of Human Rights and Labor. Request proposal to strengthen, develop democratic resilience, rule of law, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press, and the defense of human rights in Europe through research, conferences, culture, and so on. And then it says, well, what is it that the U.S. government is particularly outraged about? What is it seeking to thwart? And it says here, the purpose of democratic government is to protect natural rights and fundamental freedoms, including free speech and religious liberty, while ensuring citizens can freely choose their elected officials and hold their government accountable. Yes. And then for centuries, the transatlantic partnership has been rooted in a common understanding of natural law, virtue, and national sovereignty. However, European governments are increasingly drifting from these foundations through supranational bureaucratic overreach and partisan weaponization that concentrates power in technocratic institutions less accountable to democratic choices. And then talks about Rubio's speech at the Munich Security Conference. And then supranational institutions and governments are using state power to undermine fundamental principles of democratic self-government through overbroad and vague hate speech laws. So this is, you can see that this is through overbroad, vague hate speech laws and online content regulations that police and punish speech while suppressing political participation, which is obviously, I mean, the UK is now a joke when it comes to any kind of free speech. The highest rate of arrests anywhere in the world for social media postings is the UK, but this is very much not happening in Europe as well. So using this police to punish speech, lawfare, the manipulation of legal systems for political purposes, has become a primary tool for suppressing freedom of speech and civic engagement through politically motivated persecutions, strategic lawsuits against public participation, so the slaps. And then criminal defamation laws, regulatory sanctions against dissenting voices. These tactics create a chilling effect that discourage individuals and organizations from speaking out, even when cases lack merit, as the legal process itself becomes burdensome and intimidating. Media regulators have also been weaponized to investigate or sanction outlets publishing dissenting views under the guise of combating misinformation or disinformation, undermining independent journalism and democratic accountability. All correct, all absolutely correct. This is the Trump administration's diagnosis of the state of freedom in Europe is spot on. It's absolutely right. I mean, there is now no longer any kind of free speech in Europe. There's no longer any kind of respect for democratic choices, open, outrageous interference in one election after another, whether it's the election in Hungary, whether it's the election in Romania, whether it's the election in Moldova, whether it's the election of Georgia. This is now the norm in the EU. Trump administration is absolutely right. Now, whether any of this, whether this program will actually make any difference, but the fundamental diagnosis is correct. The problem that I have is that given the correctness of the diagnosis, why is the Trump administration, however, making nice with the EU? I mean, these people it's terrible. I mean, they really are the worst. They have no respect at all for the wishes of their voters. They're ruining their own countries with mass migrations. They're ruining their countries with pursuing economic policies are wholly detrimental to the interests of their people. They're ruining their countries by leading them into a catastrophic conflict with Russia, which not only obviously militarily would be catastrophic, but it's already catastrophic economically. All of that is correct. So why does Trump go to Ankara, as he did last week, and then sign on to all that statement in which we're going to do everything that we're going to do for Ukraine? This is the Ukraine. This is their project. This is the project of the very people that the State Department is disparaging. So if you just go back to last December, this was the Marco. Sorry, we have. Let me just. Yeah. So if you just go back to that, and here was when Marco Rubio announced these sanctions. It was very long. We did a Gaggle on that. And here is Marco Rubio declaring, for far too long, ideologues in Europe have led organized efforts to coerce American platforms to punish American viewpoints they oppose. The Trump administration will no longer tolerate these egregious acts of extraterritorial censorship. Today, the State Department will take steps to bar leading figures of the global censorship industrial complex from entering the United States. We stand ready and willing to expand this list if others do not reverse course. And then here was this Undersecretary of State, Sarah Rogers, who's very much involved in this program. And then these sanctions are visa related. We aren't invoking severe Magnitsky-style financial measures, but our message is clear. If you spend your career fomenting censorship of American speech, you're unwelcome on American soil. And our targets are foreign, but you'll notice that some collaborated with US bureaucrats on Murty-style speech suppression. Don't worry, we're pursuing transparency, truth, and reconciliation. And then, so who are they sanctioning? Thierry Breton, the master of the Digital Services Act. Thierry Breton, the man who threatened to do a Romania, which, in other words, to cancel an election should the Alternative für Deutschland party do well in Germany. Thierry Breton, the man who threatened Elon Musk and X over remember what he threatened him about? He threatened him over an interview that Elon Musk had with then candidate Trump in 2024. Breton wrote to Musk and said, well, you're violating EU law through having this interview with Trump, because he may be transmitting information that will be in violation of the Digital Services Act. And of course, Breton was responsible for these fines that have been imposed on X, one fine after another. So he was under sanction. And then in August 2024, while serving as European Commissioner for Internal Markets and Digital Services, he published a letter using the DSA to threaten Elon Musk ahead of his live stream interview with President Trump. Before the interview, Breton ominously reminded Musk of X's legal obligation and ongoing formal proceedings for alleged non-compliance with illegal content and disinformation requirements under the DSA. And then who else is sanctioned? Imran Ahmed, key collaborator with the Biden administration's effort to weaponize the government against US citizens. Ahmed's group, this is the Center for Countering Digital Hate, created the infamous Disinformation Dozen report, which called for the platforms to deplatform 12 American anti-vaxxers, including now Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy. Leaked documents from the Center for Countering Digital Hate show the organization list kill Musk's Twitter and trigger EU and UK regulatory actions as priorities, and so on. And then also Claire Melford, she leads the Global Disinformation Index, UK-based organization that monitors websites and hate speech. And then who else? Annalena von Hodenberg, leader and founder of Hate Aid, a German organization founded after the 2017 German federal elections to counter conservative groups. Hate Aid is an official trusted flagger under the EU's Anti-Speech Digital Services Act and routinely demands access to proprietary social media platforms' data to help it censor more. So this is as I say, definitely on the right track, but really, it's the question is, since it is obvious that this is these Europeans are thoroughly antithetical to what the Trump administration was trying to do. Why exactly is Trump making nice with Europe and setting forth these programs for working with Europe on Ukraine? And let me just this out. And then, so if we go back to this State Department program, then you can see here that this is the DRL solicits proposals for $1 million to $3 million to develop democratic resilience, rule of law, sovereignty, and civilizational self-confidence in Europe through research, conferences, cultural engagements, and support for civil society to address national sovereignty, migration, censorship, and lawfare challenges in line with our shared political philosophy, law, and Western heritage. So, in other words, the current EU elites are opposed to all of that. They're opposed to national sovereignty, correct? They favor mass migration. They favor, obviously, censorship, and they favor the use of lawfare to go after one's political opponents. And then here, listing all the things that they're doing, what the activities that are going to be funded, training on how to recognize, prepare for, monitor judicial proceedings, advocacy for reforms, and so on. And then again, objective 2, civil society debate elevates debate on EU integration, national sovereignty, migration, and Western identity. Research on the impact of mass migration across Europe as it relates to concerns about fundamental freedoms and democratic backsliding. And this policy debate, these are the things that they're going to be funding. And then you can see this here, that policy debates on sovereignty, migration, and globalism, consensus building forums for civil society and other relevant experts on national sovereignty, cultural engagements to promote European history and Western identity, and so on. And then illustrative outcomes and so on. Now, obviously, this is very much in keeping with what was said in that national security strategy from November 2025, when it said, should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. As such, it is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and militaries strong enough to remain reliable allies. Many of these nations are currently doubling down on their present path. We want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilizational self-confidence, and to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. And American diplomacy should continue to stand up for genuine democracy, freedom of expression, and unapologetic celebrations of European nations' individual character and history. America encourages its political allies in Europe to promote this revival of spirit, and the growing influence of patriotic European parties indeed gives cause for great optimism. Our goal should be to help Europe correct its current trajectory. We will need a strong Europe to help us successfully compete and to work in concert with us to prevent any adversary from dominating Europe. And then over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. As such, it is an open question whether they will view the place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. This, all right, let me go back. If let me just, I want to this if you just to look to, if you look at this this document. I wanted to share this with you. This is the national security strategy. This was from November of last year, and then you can see here. I mean, essentially, it's the appropriate diagnosis of these of the problems in Europe, um, and very much we want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilizational self-confidence, and to abandon its failure to focus on regulatory suffocation. American diplomacy should continue to stand up for genuine democracy, freedom of expression, and unapologetic celebrations of European nations' individual character and history. America encourages its political allies in Europe to promote this revival of spirit, and the growing influence of patriotic European parties indeed gives rise cause for great optimism. And then over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades, at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. As such, it is an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. And then now, so again, what I think is important to keep in mind here is that basically that when Trump expresses his disdain and contempt for the rulers of Europe, he really doesn't like any of them. He doesn't like Macron, he doesn't like Merz, he doesn't like Starmer, doesn't like Maloney, obviously. It is actually based on a fundamentally different philosophical outlook, and this is why during the early days of the Trump administration, there were hopeful signs that Trump wanted the United States to re-energize Western civilization. He wanted to re-energize somehow a much stronger, what he called patriotic, nationalist culture. He wanted to much greater emphasis on history, tradition, an understanding of what binds Europeans together, what binds a Western civilization together, the essential continuity of Western civilization, why it needs to be preserved, why migration obviously needs to be brought under control, and why the sort of the somewhat toxic liberal values that have prevailed in the West over now many decades, why they are so detrimental to the survival of the West. And so he intended to address that, and saw the current liberal model of the West, which is prevalent in Europe, as the enemy. And he seemed to think much the same in the United States when he initially wanted to go after the Ivy League schools, against the big foundations, because they were setting an agenda that I think is detrimental to Western civilization, and that seemed to be, in some ways, the movement within the Trump administration. Now, everything then went off the rails last June with Trump's attack on Iran jointly with Israel, which was obviously antithetical to his Make America Great Again program, to his non-interference program, to his plan to address domestic issues, the serious domestic, economic, and social problems that America was facing, and that Europe was facing. So that, so that, in other words, America would lead by example. That what America was trying to achieve, the kind of the rejuvenation, re-energization of Western culture, would then seep into Europe, because America always leads, Europe always follows, and and the key was what happened in America. But then it went off the rails. It went off the rails with that unnecessary attack, which went against everything that he had represented, and then he just seemed to be all over the place. So this, what we just had from this announcement from the State Department, is a nice reminder of what could have been, what the Trump administration had promised, and why it seemed like the new administration would actually do something far more bold and imaginative than anything that it had done during the first term. And but now, in retrospect, as we look back, we're middle of July of 2026, the Trump administration is much worse. The second term is, I think, much worse than the first term, because I think the first term he pursued a relatively cautious, pragmatic course, whereas the second term he has gone completely off the rails and pursued really nutty policies, which are obviously a disaster for America, disaster for the world, and disaster for him. I mean, I think it's, he's his administration, I think, is coming to an end. I mean, I think it's it's just marking time until really it'll be mercifully put out of its misery. It's like, much like George W. Bush after the Iraq debacle, from about 2005 onwards, we were just waiting, marking time until finally it could disappear, and we'd never see or hear of it ever again. Now, there are obviously people who are unhappy about the idea of the United States interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. And this is always so hilarious. I mean, the notion that until the Trump administration's latest plan, the State Department announced that the United States had not interfered in the domestic affairs of other countries. The United States has been doing nothing but interfering in the domestic affairs of other countries. It's always done this in through its various agencies, NED, USAID, and all their offshoots, the National Democratic Institute, the International Republican Institute, and then, of course, through its various agents of influence stationed in other countries. So it's always been interfering in other countries' affairs. Now, what we're getting from the Europeans is really a very great deal of unhappiness, but because the people who are now in power in Europe are very unhappy that essentially the Trump administration is working against them. This is actually funneling money to their opponents. And you could say, well, if you don't like interference, why would you support this? And generally, I don't really support this. I think it would be great if all countries put an end to interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. However, that is not going to happen. I mean, countries do always have interfered in the domestic affairs of their supposed friends, and of their supposed adversaries and competitors. So it's just that's not going to come to an end. But what I think is particularly irksome in the reaction, and especially the reaction from the German government, is the notion that the Germans don't interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. There's hardly any country in the world that interferes in as many countries' internal affairs as does Germany. If we look at all countries, whether it's Serbia, whether it's Romania, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Moldova, whether it's Ukraine, always the hand of Germany. Germany is always there interfering. And so, in these circumstances, when other countries are doing this, particularly when the EU does nothing but interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, when this happens, then you say, well, okay, well, let's get some interference from the other side. Let's get some anti-liberal interference. And so here we have the idea that Chancellor Merz is expressing this indignation about this American interference. So here's Politico's story: Merz to MAGA, butt out of Europe's elections. The U.S. State Department is releasing nearly $5 million in funds to help uphold what they describe as Western civilizational heritage in Europe. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Wednesday pushed back against a new $1 million funding scheme from President Trump's administration to support free speech and religious liberty in Europe. The funding comes against the backdrop of the US's efforts to support nationalist parties in Europe as part of its national security strategy, and so on. And then Merz says, we do not interfere in American elections. We've always stuck to that, Merz said in Berlin in response to a reporter's question on whether he deemed the initiative to be valid advocacy or political interference. Conversely, I don't want the American government or government-affiliated institutions to interfere in German elections. Now, as I say, Germany interferes in other countries' affairs on a regular basis. I mean, it's just, remember in Moldova, you remember when he and Macron, Merz, Macron, von der Leyen, and all the rest, because they were desperate to save the Maya Sandu, who was facing electoral defeat, and of course we had the flagrant interference in the internal affairs, and particularly the election in Armenia, when they desperately tried to push Pashinyan over the line. And then, of course, you have all the interference that went in Georgia, as they leaned on Georgia essentially to surrender power to the pro-Western political parties. So this is a regular thing. And the idea that Germany doesn't do this is a joke. And incidentally, if you recall, in the 1970s, Germany was, then it was West Germany, openly boasted of interfering in the electoral process of Portugal, because I think there was a lot of concern after the overthrow of the post-Salazar government. So Salazar died, but his successor would collapse, and there was a real fear in Europe that the communists or the far left were going to come to power in Portugal. And then Germany led the charge, poured in huge amounts of money to save Portugal from communism. So, the idea that Germany is now complaining, but of course they don't like it. They, understandably, Merz does not like it, that he's having this interference from the United States, and of course Merz, who is a leader of the Christian Democratic Union, the Christian Democratic Union, Christian Social Union Coalition, supposedly conservative, But of course, they do nothing whatever that's conservative, nothing at all that can be said to be saving civilization. They do nothing along those lines. I mean, the von der Leyen is a member of the Christian Democratic Union, also supposedly conservative. These are absolute failures in every way from the as far as Europe is concerned, and they don't really like being put, in the position of the United States openly funding opposition forces against them. Anyway, Merz then went on to complain, and here. I don't want the American government or government affiliates to interfere in German elections. And then, although the call does not explicitly list political parties as potential beneficiaries, Merz pointed to the illegality of foreign monetary support for political actors in Germany. It is illegal to finance political parties in Germany from abroad, said the conservative leader. And I assume we need to finance political parties. How much money did you pour into Moldova in order to save Maya Sandu? How much money did you pour into Romania? I mean, Thierry Breton, we just talked about, he openly boasted about the interference in the Romanian election. And I assume that our friends around the world in particular will also abide by these legal rules that we have established in Germany. And then hilarious says, senior Trump officials' claims about UK free speech arrests rejected by number 10. This is to The Guardian. Sarah Rogers' speech at a conference in London, including far-right memes and conspiracy theories about the UK. I'd like this rejected. So here she delivers a speech, and then how did the UK, what did they do to refute the claims about the threats to free speech in the UK? A UK government spokesperson said on Friday, our world-renowned justice system, since when has it been world-renowned? I don't remember it being world-renowned at all. Our world-renowned justice system operates without fear or favor to protect all our citizens. Well, except Henry Novak. It didn't do much to protect him. And we completely reject this characterization. And then Max Wilkinson, the Liberal Democrats' Home Affairs spokesperson, said repeated attempts by Trump officials to undermine the UK's democracy and justice system were out of hand, and ministers should contact counterparts in the US. Echoing bizarre online conspiracy theories about the UK is something we might expect from a hostile state rather than a NATO ally. Well, that's not a refutation. You're just saying, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Oh, it's bizarre. Well, the numbers speak for themselves. The number of arrests for social media posts in the UK far exceeds the number of arrests in any other country. The numbers speak for themselves. Oh, putting on this act of fake indignation that anybody points this out, it's not going to answer it. And then they say, citing gun violence in the US and deportations of children, the Labour MP, Stella Creasy, also hit back, saying figures like Rogers should spend less time reading Twitter conspiracy theories about the UK and more time fixing their own problems. And then Keir Starmer suggested that the US was trying to interfere in British democracy after J.D. Vance blamed the murder of Novak on mass immigration. I love this sort of, they're bringing up this gun violence in the US. This is the classic kind of whataboutism. Oh, well, what about gun violence in the US? Okay. What about homelessness? Oh, well, okay, that addresses the issue of the lack of free speech in the UK. So, you think, well, somebody needs to address it, and so as long as the United States is doing that, then you think, okay, well, I'm in favor of that. The problem arises that in a way it is all for show if on the issues that matter, the United States continues to align itself with Europe. Europe is the enemy. You have to understand it. Europe is the enemy. If you care about the survival of Western civilization, if you care about, yes, genuine democracy, if you care about, the continuity of culture, if you care about the survival of nation states, if you care about the preservation of nations' distinctive culture and civilization, then the current elite who run Europe, they're the bad guys. They're against all of that. They're in favor of globalization. They're in favor of mass migration. They're in favor of ceding control to giant corporations. And they absolutely despise, hate ordinary people who want to have a say in their own affairs. So yeah, if you want, I think, given how much money that the EU puts in to the coffers of political parties that the EU favors, I think it's perfectly appropriate that there should be money flowing in the other direction. Now, I don't have any great optimism. I see somebody says here, Ginny Mole says the UK is an absolute disgrace. Yes, absolutely. And then I see Ginny also says, George, you should remind everyone that you were detained at Heathrow this year under terrorism legislation. Yes, I should. Thank you for reminding me, Ginny. Yes, I was. I think, as you probably know, I was detained at Heathrow under the counterterrorism legislation. I'm apparently a threat to the UK. So I'm supposedly engaged in hostile activity. It was not clear hostile to what, hostile to whom, what exactly is the definition of hostility, but it sounds menacing enough. So that's where the UK is, and I think that's why it's entirely right that somebody should be funding countervailing forces, and I think this applies in the EU, where von der Leyen and Merz want to eliminate free speech altogether. Anyway, I said that I wanted to talk a little bit about J.D. Vance. So as you know, J.D. Vance went on Joe Rogan, and he started sounding off about this about Israeli influence in the United States. Correctly, right? He rightly pointed this out. But what was striking about what Vance said was that it was people who had originally worked for Trump, who are now in receipt of money from Israel, and who were using this money from Israel to campaign against Trump policies. And the person he referred to was Brad Pascali, who had, of course, been, he's a very sleazy character. He'd been arrested for all kinds of rather sleazy activities, but he's now received a lot of money from Israel, and his job is to lobby among young conservatives, young MAGA supporters on behalf of Israel. So so things started off with this article in Time magazine, and here we have this is Trump's ex-campaign manager is running an Israeli influence operation targeting the MAGA base. And so it says, last September, the global ad agency Havash hired Pascali's firm, Clock Tower X, to conduct a digital campaign on behalf of the State of Israel, according to Foreign Agents Registration Act filings reviewed by Time. Under the agreement, Pascali's operation would produce 100 original pieces of content each month, with at least 80% aimed at Gen Z audiences across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and podcasts. In a services agreement draft included in the filing, Pascali also pledged to amplify the campaign across social media and through integration of narrative messaging into Salem Media Network properties and so on. And then, referring to the Christian Conservative Broadcasting and Publishing Company, where he serves as Chief Strategy Officer, Pascali vowed the effort would produce at least 50 million digital impressions per month, as well as influence how AI tools such as ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Google's Gemini characterize Israel and the war. For all this, Israel agreed to pay Clock Tower X $1.5 million per month. It's a nice, cool change. And then publicly, the campaign was framed as an effort to combat rising anti-Semitism online. And then an Israeli Foreign Ministry official familiar with the arrangement says there was another strategic aim, preventing young conservatives from turning against Israel. According to the official, Pascali presented himself as uniquely positioned to improve Israel's reputation among young conservatives. He stressed his experience at the helm of Trump's political operation, with a grasp of both the architecture of the modern internet and the political movement Trump had built. His position at Salem, whose radio station, website, podcast, and digital, was a boon as well. And then, while Pascali acknowledged that the operation was intended to prevent young conservatives from drifting away from Israel, he says neither he nor his firms played any role in turning opinion against Trump's objectives. So that becomes a bit of a sore point, that if Israel is essentially pouring money into the United States to turn essentially Trump's former allies against Trump. Basically, not bribing Trump's former allies to turn on Trump. I have never funded, organized, or participated in any effort to undermine President Trump ever, including his MOU or ceasefire proposal, Pascali tells Time. The claim that I'm coordinating an effort to prolong the war is completely false. The only people manufacturing a conflict between President Trump, Israel, and me are anonymous officials using backgrounds, quote, to make me the bogeyman. Well, who are these anonymous officials? I assume they're people who work in the Trump administration. Anyway, so here we have, it remains unclear how much Pascali's outfits paid creators as part of the Israel campaign. Another recent influenceable campaign offered influencers a base payment of $2,250 plus $1 for every 1,000 views, up to 2 million views, allowing influencers to earn as much as $4,250 per post. People who participated, most of them asked for anonymity, fearing reprisal, rejected the suggestion that there was anything improper about the practice. Pascali says none of the money from the FARA-registered contract has been used to pay influencers, arguing that doing so would require them to disclose the source of the funding. He and other Christian organizations hired his firms, such as Influenceable, to support Israel in the wake of so on. Now, clearly, J.D. Vance was a little annoyed by this. Essentially, it's a lot of money that's being poured into these influence campaigns against him. And the go-between is this guy, Pascali, who had worked for Trump. Here's the headline: Go to hell. Vance rails at reported Israeli-backed online campaign smearing Iran MOU. And then U.S. President J.D. Vance fumed at a reported Israeli government-funded influence campaign aimed at criticizing the efforts of President Trump's administration to negotiate an end to the Iran war. And then there was this Time article that came out yesterday. It lists a bunch of people who have been paid by former Trump campaign person who was himself paid by certain elements within the Israeli government. And these people are attacking me viciously for trying to accomplish the negotiation objective that the president set for the country. Vance said during an interview with the podcaster Joe Rogan, calling it a very discreet, extremely well funded campaign to try to derail the negotiations. Pascal admitted that the goal of the campaign was to stop young Americans from turning against Israel, but pushed back on the idea that the effort extended to tarring the administration's diplomacy with Iran. Vance brought up the story unprovoked during his Rogan interview. It's social media posts, it's leaking to reporters. They're attacking me obsessively, saying that we should not be negotiating with Iran. We should just keep the military campaign going on indefinitely. People have come after me and said, I'm influenced by Qatar, that I'm influenced by foreign governments, that I take my marching orders from Tucker Carlson. And there's just so much bullshit out there. He said, foreign governments try to influence the United States all the time. Israel does it, other countries do it. What bothers me is when American leadership allows that influence to affect their judgment and to affect what they are advocating for. Well, that's quite an admission. What bothers me is when American leadership allows that influence to affect their judgment and to affect what they are advocating for. So yeah, that's pretty much what people have been saying, yeah, that you essentially, Israel is exerting undue influence on the American government. Not that they're running public relations campaign, that they're trying to interfere in the internal affairs of the United States. Everybody does that. I said that earlier apropos of the indignation from Friedrich Merz. Oh my God, America's interfering in our internal affairs. We never do that. Of course, Merz did interfere in the 2024 US election. But what Vance is saying, what Vance goes beyond that, Vance is saying, well, the leadership, American leadership, I wonder who he's referring to, is not making decisions in the interests of their own people. Then they're making decisions in the interests of other people. And so here it says, I just read that again. What bothers me is when American leadership allows that influence to affect their judgment and to affect what they are advocating for. And then it says, when I open up the pages of Time magazine and I see that there's a foreign influence campaign being funded to tank the very deal that I was pursuing, and many of the people who were receiving that money were attacking me in completely dishonest ways, my response to that is, go to hell. I'm going to do what I have to do for the American people. I represent Americans first. And then there are some people within the Israeli system, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, who are manipulating and trying to change American public opinion to keep the war going on indefinitely. Asked whether the US would have launched its war against Iran if it were not for Israeli influence, Vance responded in the affirmative. I think the president, completely separate from any influence from Israel, believes very strongly, and I again agree with this, that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. So he just repeats this, that obviously as a kind of mantra. However, you can see that he's more or less said that it's the leadership, American leadership, that is unduly influenced by Israel. Now, of course, he's going to say, yeah, Trump made that decision all on his own. It wasn't, Trump knows his own mind. It's not Israel, and so on and so forth. But he's said enough there to suggest that that's not really what he believes. He has, obviously, he's the vice president. He has to support the president. But it's clear from the things he said that it really isn't what he actually believes. And then goes on. A surprise Rogan pressed Vance on whether the US would have continued the war, which began on February the 28th, for as long as it did, if not for Israeli influence, though the vice president maintained his position. Vance has been one of the most outspoken members of the administration in criticizing Israel, particularly as he has come under fire for the MOU that he helped negotiate. Well, you can also obviously see here the jockeying that is taking place for the 2028 GOP nominations. Vance is, while loyally supporting Trump, is nonetheless distancing himself from Trump, and obviously distancing himself in a quite striking way, distancing himself by pointing to the undue influence of Israel. And that's within the Republican Party. And then you saw what happened in the vote in the House yesterday on this motion to cut off all aid to Israel. So while the GOP, pretty much everybody, with the exception of Thomas Massie, voted to continue funding Israel, more than 100 Democrats voted against continuing to fund Israel, 100 that included, Nancy Pelosi. Now, of course, the Democrats knew that the Republicans would vote overwhelmingly for it, and that they knew, therefore, this amendment wasn't going to pass. However, it is striking ahead of 2028 that more than one half of the Democratic caucus voted against more funding for Israel. So that's, again, is reflection of how much opinion has changed. You've got J.D. Vance, the vice president, saying, hey, go to hell. And then you have the vote in Congress with Democrats. And there's going to be clearly Democrats in the 2028 field who are going to be very cool on Israel. I'm not saying that those people will necessarily secure the nomination, but it is a reflection of how much public opinion has shifted on Israel. So that was one other thing I wanted. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is I like to talk about Serbia, as you know. I've always been quite interested in it, and very recently there was a meeting on the issue of whether the Serbia should be they should begin negotiations on on accession to the EU. I mean, Serbia has been waiting for the beginning of these negotiations on accession to the EU, I think, since about 2012. But in a recent vote, a number of countries voted not to begin negotiations with Serbia. So I remember everyone in the EU has voted to begin negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova, but nonetheless, but not with Serbia. So here was this this Euronews story about this. It says 8 member states oppose the opening of Serbia's next EU accession cluster, and then here was 8 out of 27 member states opposed opening another round of accession talks with Serbia at a meeting attended by EU ambassadors in Brussels. And then it says the member states that oppose Cluster 3, which centers on competitiveness and inclusive growth, were the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Belgium, Estonia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and Croatia. And then the 3 member states that remain less opposed but not convinced are Denmark, Luxembourg, and Latvia, while general supporters of Serbian accession include power broker France and then Barnabas would start complaining and so on. So that was the decision that was taken uh, a few days ago. And what's happened in the last couple of days was only going to reassure these people that Serbia should not be brought into the EU. What happened was that a minister in the Serbian government, a minister who belonged to Slobodan Milosevic's Socialist Party, gave an interview in which he said that, well, if she were in Milosevic's place in 1998, she would have ethnically cleansed Kosovo. Now, she didn't quite say that. The newspaper headlines naturally seized on that. Oh, Vucic minister says Kosovo should have been ethnically cleansed. She didn't quite say that. I mean, what she said was that it should have been made clear to the Albanians in Kosovo in 1998. I mean, she herself, incidentally, this minister is from Kosovo, so she, in effect, was also ethnically cleansed. She's been driven out of Kosovo. What she said, that those Albanians who did not want to be a part of Serbia, did not want to be a part of Yugoslavia, and that was a large portion of the Kosovo Albanians. They basically, Milosevic shouldn't have bothered trying to integrate them into Yugoslavia. They were never going to accept this. It was a waste of time, and so basically should have just moved to throw them out, and which would have been a fairly straightforward procedure to be done legally, because most of the it's hard to know most of what the exact numbers were, but a very substantial proportion of the Albanian population of Kosovo had been living there illegally. They basically were entered Kosovo illegally over many years. I mean, it had started in Tito time. That Albanians were entering Kosovo because there was a better health care system in Yugoslavia, much better welfare education system in Yugoslavia, and so it was to their advantage to move into Kosovo. So many of them were living there illegally. So her point was more that that trying to satisfy the Europeans, trying to satisfy NATO, was a waste of time. So what Milosevic was trying to do was somehow to agree to some formula of integrating Kosovo into Yugoslavia. That was just a complete waste of time, and it was always going to be used against him. But instead, it should have been made clear, if you don't like it here, and they made and the Albanians of Kosovo made it clear over and over again since 1989 that they really didn't like it. They didn't like being a part of Serbia. They made that clear many times. Then if they don't like it, then they can leave. Well, that, of course, has caused a huge uproar and has been seized on naturally internationally. So that's why what I was saying, that I think Serbia's chances of ever beginning to negotiate the next cluster, whatever the hell they are, with the EU, has now been put back even further. So here is the Reuters story about this interview with the minister. And says Kosovo bans Serb minister over ethnic cleansing remarks. Kosovo's interior minister said on Tuesday it had declared a Serb minister a permanent persona non grata over her remarks made a day earlier that if she had been a leader during the Kosovo War, she would have ethnically cleansed Kosovo. And then more than 13,000 people, the majority of them Kosovo Albanians, are believed to have died during the late 1990s insurgency. It's always very amusing when they come up with these numbers. So for years and years, um, they settled on a number. 10,000 people were killed during the war. I don't know how they came up with that number, but they settled it. You remember, initially, the claim was that 100,000, the Serbs had killed 100,000 people. That was the line that was repeated again and again by NATO ministers, including Clinton administration officials, that the Serbs had killed 100,000 Albanians in 1999. Then they realized that this number was ridiculous. And particularly when the ICTY marched into Kosovo at the end of the NATO bombing, and they basically couldn't find any bodies. They were digging, couldn't find anything. So finally, they settled on this number, 10,000. It's a nice round number, and they said, okay, so 10,000, and that was just repeat. Yeah, 10,000 were killed, most of them Albanian. And then, step by step, the numbers started creeping up. There was no reason why it started creeping up any more than there was a reason why they settled on 10,000. So they crept up. Oh, now it's 11,000. Oh, 12,000. Now it's 13,000. 13,000. It's much the same as with the estimate of the number of people killed at Srebrenica. So how many the Serbs are supposed to have executed? It was always 8,000 men and boys at Srebrenica. It was always 8,000, 8,000, 8,000. There was never any basis for that number, 8,000. But now it's sort of, crept up, and now it's sort of 8,600. And then you got, it just keeps up. Trump, of course, does this all the time when he talks about Iran, how many people the Iranian government killed when it suppressed the riots of December and January. It sort of creeps up. I think last time, Trump claimed, they killed 60,000 people. How they managed to kill 60,000 in a matter of days with what? But anyway, he came up with 60,000. So here, again, we keep moving the numbers up. So here they've decided on this number of 13,000. And then when Kosovo was still a province of Serbia, under then nationalist strongman President Slobodan Milosevic, whose troops violently cracked down on ethnic Albanians. Tell us what you really think, Reuters. And then the comments, and this was the politician, Snježana Paunovic. She's the Serbian Minister for State Administration and Local Self-Governance. And then here they gain this. The quote is, of course, mangled. We'll see what she actually said in a minute. The EU Enlargement Commissioner, Marta Koch, no story about Serbia is ever complete without some imbecilic utterance from Marta Koch. Condemned the remarks, there is no place in Europe for rhetoric that justifies, advocates, and glorifies ethnic cleansing. She didn't quite glorify it, but anyway, and Inegers, as she said Milosevic was a disappointment to her because he actually didn't do any ethnic cleansing. Anyway, and of course, this is the Turkish publications, the Turks have been always the worst on all this. Serbian ministers said she would have ethnically cleansed Kosovo if in Milosevic's place. And then she says, Kosovo's minister, and then they quote Kosovo. You see, the only thing that matters is what the Kosovo ministers say. Kosovo's minister for Labor, Family, and the Values of the Kosovo Liberation War, Andin Halhoti, said the statement shows that Serbia has not freed itself from its genocidal ideology. Your ideological father, Milosevic, tried the same thing in Kosovo, but ended up before international justice. While Serbia left Kosovo with its tail between its legs, Hoti said, addressing the Serbian minister's remarks. Well, if we go back in history to that bombing campaign, Serbia defeated the Kosovo Liberation Army. It was over. It was defeated. The reason for the NATO bombing if you look at the history of what happened, the usual gang, the Western powers, CIA, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, was sponsoring the Kosovo Liberation Army in order to ultimately bog down the Serbian and Yugoslav armies in Kosovo. So providing them with arms, weapons, money, and so on. And they launched a campaign in 1997 against the authorities in Kosovo, but of course, in order to drive out the Serbian Yugoslav armies. Now, the problem was that the Serbs really defeated the KLA very easily. They somehow thought that the KLA was to be the incarnation of Ho Chi Minh, the Viet Cong, some of the great national liberation movements, but in fact, they were defeated very easily. And so that was why essentially NATO went to Plan B, which is direct intervention, which is to bomb the Serbs directly, because the KLA was done. They were useless. So for this Kosovo creature, to start talking, they left with the tail between their legs, maybe, but that was after being bombed by NATO, not with anything you did. You didn't do anything. You were defeated really very, very quickly. So it was NATO that defeated Serbia. Well, that's not really that difficult. I mean, at the time, it was, I think, a 19-member alliance, and Serbia, a country with a population of 8 million, well, it wasn't that difficult to defeat Serbia. But anyway, so this is this Kosovo creature. But then, long the response of the people, Kosovo Liberation Army, Kosovo remained free. Milosevic ended up as a war criminal, and today he lies in the ground. Anyone who today calls for ethnic cleansing is not only a threat to Kosovo, they are proof that Serbia has still not freed itself from Milosevic's genocide. So the Turks published this drivel. And anyway, and then. This is from the AFP. It's published in Arab News. And it says the European Union on Tuesday condemned comments from a Serbian government minister who said she would ethnically cleanse Kosovo if she had been empowered during the 1990s conflict. Speaking to Serbian television station Kurir over the weekend, Public Administration Minister Snježana Paunović said she would strip Kosovo of Albanians if she had been in the place of strongman Slobodan Milosevic during the 1998-99 war, not by liquidating them in the way they have sought to ethnically cleanse Kosovo to this day, but by ensuring that anyone who feels less like a citizen leaves and goes to their homeland. The minister was born in Kosovo said, responding to a journalist's question about the comment, EU spokeswoman Anita Hipper said, there is no place in Europe for rhetoric justifying and advocating ethnic cleansing. Such statements run counter to the values of human dignity, reconciliation, and accountability, not one of which are you in the slightest bit interested. But anyway, the minister's comments triggered calls from opposition parties for her resignation, but she remained unrepentant. I do not renounce SPS politics, that's the Socialist Party of Serbia, that she's a member of that. So she's not actually a member of Vucic's party. It's called the Progressive Party, but she's a member of the Milosevic's party, which is now a rather small party, but in a coalition government with Vucic's party. I do not renounce SPS policy. We are a party that led Serbia in indescribably difficult historical circumstances, a party that made great sacrifices. And then, of course, who's first out of the gate? Well, apart from Marta Koch, well, the British. The British, of course, who, of course, had a very poisonous effect on on what happened in Yugoslavia, and then what happened in Kosovo. So there is the UK embassy in Serbia that issued this Twitter thread. Here, a statement from the UK Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office spokesperson: we condemn Serbian Minister Snježana Paunovic's remarks, including the references to ethnic cleansing of Kosovo. They are utterly abhorrent and have no place in today's society. At a time when countries across the Western Balkans are focused on building a peaceful, stable, and multi-ethnic future, remarks such as these seek to reopen old divisions and inflame tensions. Responsible political leaders should reject such language clearly and unequivocally. We note President Vucic's repudiation of these comments. Now, keep in mind, the whole idea of accountability and reconciliation is the very opposite of everything that the UK and NATO, EU have been doing for years. For years and years and years, they've been demonizing the Serbs and demanding that the Serbs accept something that is obviously a counter to their history, their integrity, their national dignity. Namely, they should drop all claims to Kosovo, even though Kosovo is the origins of the Serbian state. Drop Kosovo. Next, give up the Dayton Accords, whereby they enjoyed the kind of substantial autonomy that was granted under the Dayton Agreement. And then next, turn against Russia, their traditional ally and patron. This is a constant drumbeat. So here they're talking about reconciliation and whatever. There's no reconciling that's going on here. And Vucic, who just attended some kind of a meeting in Ukraine, he went there, the Southeast Europe, Ukraine Forum, or whatever the hell it was. There was a Ukraine sort of Southeast Europe promising that they're going to deliver arms and humanitarian aid and of course tighten sanctions and everything against Russia. So Vucic went to that place, but Vucic could not bring himself to sign a document promising to tighten sanctions against Russia. I mean, Vucic, there are no sanctions against Russia by Serbia. So this is part of this whole charade that Vucic goes through, whereby he says, well, we want to be a part of the EU, we want to be a part of this community, we want to be the Southeast Europe community, we strongly support Ukraine, we're going to go there and talk Ukraine, we'll give you humanitarian aid and so on. But what about sanctions against Russia? Well, we can't really do that. I mean, we've got a history to consider. Oh, well, you go to hell then. And lo and behold, he's still out of the club. They're not going to open any EU negotiations. That cluster, whatever that we talked about a moment ago. They're not going to open any negotiations because it doesn't go along with the EU plan. And now, of course, they're demanding that he fire this minister. Now, having said that, I mean, I can understand her point, but you have to be very careful what you say. You never want to be quoted as advocating for ethnic cleansing. I mean, you can say, which I think is reasonable, which was that the project of integrating Kosovo into Serbia was always doomed. But I think the problem was, was that Milosevic never supported that policy of ethnic cleansing. I mean, his point, and I think this was the correct point, that this policy of separatism. Essentially, it was a separatism, Albanian separatism. That's why all this talk about reconciliation, multiculturalism, multinationalism, it's all garbage. What the British did, what NATO did, what the EU did was to foster separatism, sectarianism, and very narrow religious parochialism. And they did it deliberately in order to break up Yugoslavia and in order to break up Serbia. So, all these are absolute lies that the British and the UK embassy in Serbia is saying. But given what NATO was up to, probably not much could have been done. But I think the position, at least that Milosevic took in public, was that we could have worked something out with the Kosovo Albanians. We couldn't work anything out as long as NATO was behind the Kosovo Albanians, because whatever we were going to offer the Kosovo Albanians, the NATO would always demand more, would always say, this is inadequate, this is insufficient. You basically got to give the Kosovo Albanians everything and give NATO something, and that led to the catastrophe of Rambouillet. So even if even if you had embarked on this ethnic cleansing campaign, if you tried to push them out in 98, 99, which would have, it could have been done. NATO would have seized on that to bomb Yugoslavia. It was a done deal. NATO was going to bomb Yugoslavia. There was no question about that. It was going to happen. But if there was real evidence that in fact the Serbs were driving out the Kosovo Albanians, that would have provided genuine justification. As it turned out, it was all a lie. The NATO bombing campaign was premised on a lie. But if Milosevic has done what this woman says he should have done, then NATO would have had his justification and said, "Yeah, hey, this is what look what he's doing." But in fact, Serbia wasn't doing that, and that's why Milosevic's defense at the ICTY was so effective, because he actually challenged the case. He said, "Well, give me your evidence. Give me what proof do you have that I ever had a plan to drive out the Albanians?" And they couldn't come up with any plan. You said this to General Klaus Naumann and Wesley Clark, when they came to see you. And then I said, "Well, I never said it. I never said it." "Oh, And then Klaus Naumann, this absolutely loathsome, the worst smarmy German that you'll come across. This Klaus Naumann, he testified at the ICTY. "Oh, yeah, he said he was going to do this. He told us in confidence." Yeah, right. So Milosevic would admit to two of his enemies, General Wesley Clark, the Supreme Allied commander, and Klaus Naumann, who he was a big NATO general. He would admit to them that he intended to ethnically cleanse Kosovo. And that's when Klaus Naumann said, "Oh, well, it was after dinner, and he offered us some slivovitz, and so it was over a glass of slivovitz that Milosevic told us that he was going to do this." To which Milosevic said, "Well, that's very interesting, because I never actually drink slivovitz. I drink pear brandy." Naumann then, of course, quickly beat a hasty retreat and said, "Well, I'm not really an expert on alcohol." Well, why did you bring up slivovitz? No one asked you. You brought this up because you were lying, and as always happens with liars, they add a detail which they think will give credibility to their lies. So if you put in the detail, oh yeah, yeah, we sat down over drinks and he served us slivovitz, because well, slivovitz, well, yeah, that's what Serbs drink. They drink slivovitz. It's like if it was a Hungarian, oh yeah, yeah, Viktor Orban offered us some palinka, all this, so slivovitz. But I said, no, I never drink slivovitz. Just don't do it. I would never have served you slivovitz. Oh well, I'm not an expert on alcohol like Milosevic. I mean, this is what and then you knew at that moment that this was a total lie. But the point is that the ICTY never had any evidence, no evidence whatsoever, that Milosevic ever intended to drive out the Albanians from Kosovo. And so anyway, we can go on for a bit more. So this is the UK and Serbia, and of course, here's Danas, a Serbian publication. Violent reactions in Pristina to Minister Snježana Paunovic's statement about ethnic cleansing of Kosovo. And then she was saying, and then it all started with a statement that Paunovic made in the show Untold, broadcast on July the 11th on Courier TV. If I was Slobodan Milosevic, I would have ethnically cleansed Kosovo in 1998, said the minister, clarifying what she meant by ethnic cleansing. If I had been in Milosevic's place, I would have ethnically cleansed Kosovo. And that is the most difficult qualification I have ever uttered, not in the way they want to liquidate us, but in a way they don't feel part of Serbia and go to their home country. So it's saying basically, what if you don't like it so much, you hate it so much in Serbia, then, you're here illegally. It's like, but you're living in Serbia illegally. Instead of retracting the statement or apologizing, Paunovic then posted on Instagram along with screenshots of Albanian media reports. And then she says, interestingly, in the so-called Kosovo, they say a scandalous statement in the sea of comments on my profiles. They call the international community for help, curse, threaten. Why the nervousness? I don't understand. Then she continued, so it is permissible to seize territory, kill people, trade in organs, demolish cemeteries and churches, arrest the innocent, but the statement is a scandal. And then this is from, again, this is Radio Free Europe. And then here we have Vucic, who naturally had to weigh in on this, and does it with his usual, his usual kind of ineffectualness. And he said that her statement did not reflect his will or the will of the Serbian government, and that the state's policy is dialogue, never ethnic cleansing. Vucic's statement comes 4 days after this interview, and then it says, careless and insufficiently responsible, such a statement should not be made in public, and it is not a policy, neither mine nor that of the Serbian government. It is ours to say it clearly. And then the Serbian government, Paunovic said she would not liquidate the Albanians in the way they are trying to ethnically cleanse Kosovo to this day, but in such a way that anyone who feels less like a resident of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia leaves it and goes to their home country. And then here, Vreme, and this is Dacic, who is the head of the Serbian Socialist Party, and here Paunovic then says, we, the SPS, the Socialist Party, we are a party that led Serbia in indescribably difficult historical circumstances, a party that made great sacrifices, a party whose name was most often mentioned in The Hague, a party that did not ask anyone for anything in order to remain upright and faithful to its ideas. And then the Vice President Branko Ružić told this Nova RS portal that I think it would be correct, that somehow this was never, at this point, which is the correct point, this was never a policy of the Socialist Party of Serbia. So Milosevic has never adopted this policy, which I think she agrees. And then Ivica Dacic also announced himself as the deputy prime minister. He assessed that the attacks on Paunovic are shameless and hypocritical, stressing that those who accuse her of allegedly calling for ethnic cleansing are at the same time silent about the ethnic cleansing of Serbs from Kosovo and Metohija, which is very interesting because who he's referring to the Serb opposition, who don't seem to care very much about the Serbs in Kosovo, who are in Kosovo, yet they're indignant about what supposedly did or did not happen in 98, 99. Why does no one mention that there were 40 to 50 Serbs? I think they mean 40,000 to 50,000 Serbs in Pristina in 1991. Where are they now? Now there are 400 of them. I was born in Prizren, where there were 10,000 Serbs in 1991, and today there are about 20 of them, Dacic asked in the statement, adding, and now Snježana Paunovic is guilty of ethnic cleansing. Shame on you. She said that everyone who does not feel Serb, they should return to their home country, the country of Albania. And then talking about this Anita Hipper, and then that's in this article for Vreme, who is Snježana Paunovic? And then it says that this is the machine translation, so it's not particularly great. She announced the statement as part of our shortcomings and our stupidity, probably referring to the state leadership of Serbia. In other words, that was the shortcomings and stupidity. She means Milosevic. And then so she added that Milosevic and the SBS never had the relationship that she has towards the topic, and that today, in her mature years, sadness, anger, and disappointment speak from her. She also talked about how difficult it was for Sloba because they declared him a butcher. Sloba, that's Slobodan. Because they declared him a butcher, although, well, he didn't do what she would have. Although Paunovic says that Milosevic did nothing similar, the former president of Yugoslavia was tried before the Hague Tribunal for War Crimes in Kosovo. And so according to the ICTY, Milosevic led a conspiracy in Kosovo whose goal was to expel a significant part of the Kosovo Albanian population. And she says, no, he never did that. I would have done it. He didn't do it. We are a party that led Serbia in indescribably difficult historical circumstances, a party that made great sacrifices, a party whose name most often mentioned in The Hague, a party that did not ask anyone for anything in order to remain upright and faithful to its ideas. I'm not renouncing the party's strategies, which were chosen for the circumstances of the armed rebellion in the part of the House called Serbia. At the same time, I'm not renouncing my right to talk about the mistakes we made and to analyze what could have been different, said Paunovic. All right, so that's very, very interesting because, of course, you do get a sense of how diverse Vučić's coalition is. Remember, I think last week we were talking about this Barnabić, who had been Vučić's prime minister, and now she's the Speaker of the House, and who is saying, well, we want to be part of Europe, we have nothing to do with Russia. No, we don't have anything to do with Russia. We're not Russia's little brother. We don't even have good relations with Russia. And so that was Barnabić, and then here we have this Paunovic, who's talking about the ethnic cleansing. Now, of course, there's going to be demands on that Vučić fire her, and I don't know whether Vučić will do that. To be honest, he's a very slippery character. He may not. He may think that that's politically would be an unwise move because she said something, as I say, leaving aside the wisdom of her statement, because I don't think that was a wise statement. Because it goes against Milosevic's defense at the ICTY. He said that I never did that. We never did that. There was never an interest of ours. We were fighting NATO, just as Russia's today fighting NATO in Ukraine. We were fighting NATO. NATO was using the KLA against us. NATO was using ethnic separatism against us, just like NATO was using the worst, scummiest Ukrainian neo-Nazi nationalism against Russia. That's what NATO does. And that was his argument. If you, however, you say, well, we should have thrown them out, and I understand what she means by that, but that plays into the hands of Serbia's enemies, which is I think what Vucic was saying. We shouldn't say these things in public. However, Vucic, who has elections coming up, I don't think he can exactly afford to kick her out, to fire her, because I think she speaks for many Serbs. I think many Serbs feel exactly that. I mean, they think rightly that Kosovo was stolen from them. They think rightly that they were the victims of aggression. And they think, rightly or not, but they think that in bending over backwards to try to accommodate the Albanian separatist nationalism, Serbia received nothing for it except accusations of butchery and everything else. So she speaks for a substantial section of the population. So I think there's going to be pressure on Vucic to fire her. My bet would be that he isn't going to do it. I think not with elections coming up. But anyway, let's now move on to our locals page. The locals community. These are the people who keep this keep the Gaggle community going, and they feel they need to reward the dogs, which is always much appreciated, and to support the work, the journalism that we do here. And so really appreciate our community. And as I always urge people, if you want to talk to me, if you want me to address your questions, if you have comments, criticisms of anything I do or say, then please join the locals community, because it's the people who post comments and questions on the locals board. It's their comments and questions that I answer. I can't really, I'm unable to really to follow everything that goes on YouTube. So please join our community, thegaggle.locals.com. And so thank you so much. Anyway, first question is from Danaki, who's one of our most active members and a prolific poster, always has something interesting. I see there seems to be a connection problem on the broadcaster's end. Please sit tight while the issue is being resolved. Well, I'll sit tight and I will continue to talk. So, okay, I'm back. All right. So, okay. And anyway, Danaki's first question, Spain or Argentina? Well, I have to say, just going back to last night's football, it was a fantastic victory by Argentina. I think that they've become the masters of the late comeback. They do this all the time. And I think they thoroughly deserve their victory. That I thought Messi played superbly, and now I do think that the British, as is their wont, the British are always the worst. The worst losers in the world are the British. They always start complaining and whining. If it's not the referee, it's the linesman. If it's the bad food, it's the noise outside the hotel room. It's the unfair accusations by the locals. They're not treated courteously by the hotel staff. They've always got 100 excuses for why they lose. and now they're attacking really the sort of the master tactician who's their coach, which is Thomas Tuchel, who I think he is a he is a master tactician. I remember when he was the manager of Chelsea, and he powered Chelsea, which wasn't really a great team, but he managed to get Chelsea to win the European Champions League trophy. I think that was in 2021. Yeah, I think it was 2021. And they defeated Manchester City. Manchester City was a much better team, but somehow Tuchel, figured out the right tactics of how to play City, and Chelsea won the match. So the attacks on his tactical decision making, I think, are ridiculous. I think England overperformed. I don't think England was that great. I think they were quite lucky to get to the semi-finals. Now, to address Denounces' questions, Argentina or Spain, I have to think that Spain might pull it off. Spain so far has been playing like an efficient machine. And the way they handled France strikes me being that's ominous for Argentina, because I actually had France to win. I thought France would defeat Spain. France just had too much talent for Spain, but in fact, Spain won pretty easily, and they are an efficient, well-oiled machine. And I think they may just be a little too much for Argentina. That everything depends on Messi. If they can control Messi, if they're able to ensure that Messi doesn't take control of the game in the way Tuchel failed to do. Messi was just, England couldn't do anything about him. If Spain is able to deal with Messi, and I suspect they will be able to deal with him, then I think Spain will win. If Spain fails to control Messi, then I would go with Argentina. But I think I'm slightly leaning towards Spain. I think they just so far. I mean, I think they've conceded one goal in the whole tournament. If you only concede one goal, you really are playing at a very high level. So I think I'd go for that. And then NKMRD says Spain, of course. Germany lost the World Cup. Nothing can lift my mood. Yeah, well, Germany has been really pretty poor for a number of cycles. They had a very good team in 2014 when they won the World Cup, and when they crushed Brazil in that amazing match. But in the last three cycles, they've really performed very poorly. Very very unlike Germany. Germany at least goes through to the semi-final stages or the finals, but they were knocked out early on in the tournament. So Germany, this isn't the Germany of previous World Cups, when you could always count on them to perform well. Anyway, so then Cynthia, this is our good friend Cynthia, a film expert, film scholar, with her extraordinary knowledge of cinema. I'm always saying this because I'm touting it. It's one of the selling points of the Gaggle, that we have an outstanding expert on cinema commenting on films, always very good films, for Gagglers. And so because Cynthia knows so much about films, knows so much about the history of cinema, the intricacies of the production of cinema, and she very generously allows us to enjoy the fruits of her many years of learning. So we really appreciate everything that Cynthia does. And this week, we're running one of the all-time greats, one of the really outstanding American films, The Night of the Hunter. Absolutely see the film. And as you watch the film, as I always say, read Cynthia's comments. You can, just as you're watching it, because you're going to be able to appreciate the film that much more. You're going to learn so much more about how this film was made, how the film, how critics and audiences responded, and how public opinion dramatically shifted. Public opinion, cinema public opinion shifted on the night of the Hunter. So a film that was really left everyone cold when it came out is now, touted as one of the greatest American films ever made. So you can learn all of that from Cynthia's commentary. Anyway, Cynthia says here, Trump nixed deploying U.S. troops for a land offensive, declaring the U.S. would only provide air power. Sometimes you need a ground campaign, but we have other people who'll do the ground campaign for us. The gutless idiom, I'll hold your coat, goading a brawl while dodging the fistfight, perfectly exposes this cowardice. Reduced to bystanders, U.S. forces will just hold the jackets of foreign troops. Its pathetic policy reduces the world's costliest military to history's most expensive coat rack. Yes, all of that is correct, but of course, no one is going to go in to fight, because no one, first, obviously, no one wants to go and get killed, but no one really believes in this cause. This is Trump's war. This is Trump and Netanyahu's war. Why should anyone get into this? Why should anyone lose lives for a war that they didn't want, a war that they had actually opposed? So it's not going to happen. And Trump will then turn around and say, well, we were ready to provide air power, but no one was there to send in troops. I mean, no one is going to send in ground forces. I mean, it's insane. I mean, it's sending in forces into a meat grinder. It's not going to happen. And then Trump will make the claim that he made at the time of the Strait of Hormuz. Hey, come in and open up the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, nobody did so. And then, why would they? Because, this was not a war that they wanted. This was Trump's war. So if it's your war, then you go and fight it. You do it. Don't expect somebody else to go in and fight it. So I mean, so it's worse than, hey, I'll hold your jacket for you. It's more like, you start the whole thing, and then you're looking around now. Who's going to come in and fight my fight for me? So it really is quite pathetic. I still think, I mean, that this can't go on. This is simply not sustainable. This policy. I mean, I guess he could go on bombing and attacking and keeping up the blockade for another 2-3 weeks, but he's going to find himself in the same position as he found himself in early April. The world economy is tanking. He's not really getting anywhere with Iran. And it's not benefiting, one has to be honest. I mean, it's not benefiting Iran. I mean, Iran isn't getting anything out of this. It's not it's selling its oil. It's not getting sanctions lifted. It's not getting its assets back. And so it's still isolated. So it doesn't make any sense to continue with this. I have to think they're going to go back to something. I mean, that they'll go back, not necessarily to the MOU, but they'll negotiate some other agreement that will, I think, be less ambiguous in its wording. So as this was, with its paragraph 5, which is open to all kinds of interpretations. I think they'll go back. So I think they'll go back to another version of the MOU. I think this MOU is dead, but they're going to come up with something, because this just simply makes no sense for anyone. And if you're not going to get regime change, you're not going to get any. You're not going to defeat Iran, but at the same time, Iran isn't achieving any of its objectives. I mean, at the very least, to be able to sell its oil in the world market. So that I have to think current situation is not sustainable. Anyway, Cynthia says, in hindsight, is it possible Trump engineered the 20% toll to replicate his crypto scam. His motive, turning a vital oil route into a private cash pool, just as his family pocketed the 2.3 billion from token fees while buyers lost big. Trump planned from day one to use the White House power to tax trade for vast personal gain. This fee yields the exact blueprint, forcing drivers into a rigged rug pull with surging gas prices, while he, as a powerful MIC insider, channels trade profits bigly into the complex. Well, I think, as I say, I mean, the 20% toll is now off the table. That's not to say, however, that he isn't making money from this with playing the markets, because he's been doing this really throughout the crisis. I mean, you release oil from the strategic petroleum reserves, boom, the price of crude goes down. Okay, then you whip up some you send out some truths threatening to blow up everything in Iran to kingdom come. Boom, oil price surges. He knows that his policies, his utterances, everything he does is having an enormous effect on the prices. And since it's possible for him to make these trades, or his family to make these trades, then this is manipulation. I mean, he's making money off his of war sanctions and bombing and everything else. He's making money off it. Well, I have to say, I'm kind of surprised. I always thought that the presidents couldn't do that, but Trump has really turned the book on that one, and he is actually is a direct beneficiary of his own policies. He's a direct beneficiary of his utterances. So there's this constant market manipulations through his utterances. I mean, essentially, it's a safe bet. I mean, he's just making money because he knows exactly how the markets will move, and therefore he knows exactly how to make money. So he's taking no gamble. He just knows exactly how to make money because he knows what will cause oil prices to fall and what will cause oil prices to rise. It's a quite extraordinary situation. So yeah, I mean, I don't have any doubt that this whole thing is a scam and that he is making a lot of money on this war. Now, the corollary of that is that if the world economy does go into a tailspin, and then there's suddenly a recession and all sorts of other things, then he's not going to be making any money. So he has to, maintain this level of, little jump in price and a fall in price and so on. He has to maintain that level. He can't allow the global economy to collapse because then no one's making any money. Okay, thank you so much, Cynthia. And here's a picture of from Marty. It was good to see you, Marty. And it's a picture of Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, the two contenders for the crown in 2028. And I think, as we discussed earlier, J.D. Vance has figured out what exactly needs to be done in order to get that nomination. I think that he has the inside track. I disagree with those who say that his loyalty to Trump is going to stand in the way. He has to be loyal. Everyone understands that. He has to be loyal to the president. That's his job. You're appointed vice president. You accept the appointment. And what goes with the job is loyalty to the president. However, he's said enough to suggest that he will break with Trump's policy, and particularly on this policy with on Israel. And of course, all the rest. When we talk about Europe, as we were talking earlier, Vance is far more hostile and skeptical about Europe than Trump is. Trump, of course, detests Europe, but Vance, I think, is really his hostility to Europe is genuinely philosophically grounded. I mean, he really detests the contemporary liberal globalist Europe. So that will be an absolutely unshakable foundation of any Vance administration. That's not to say that I think Vance is going to win in 2028. I think he'll get the nomination, but you know, I'm not sure it's going to be a Republican year. But anyway, thank you for that picture of JD and Marco. Marco looking very, very not happy, because Marco really doesn't have any um, clear line of his own. He's sort of MAGA and he's not MAGA. He's a neocon. He's not a neocon. He's a kind of a European Europhile. He's not a Europhile. So he's just all over the place in a different way from Vance. I think is allowing people to think that his policies would be different, but he has to be loyal. Rubio, no one knows exactly what the hell Rubio is thinking. He just wants to be president, and he always has. Um, anyway, here is this is Aubergine. Thank you very much, Aubergine, for your generosity. It says, in spite of the grim situation in the world, it seems to the casual viewer that you may be a little less shrouded in depression than usual. For that, I congratulate you. Well, thank you very much. My question is this. Do you think the Magyar government will ultimately fall into line, lock, stock, and barrel with the EU's broader agenda on online speech, digital identity, and related regulation? And if so, do you think the Hungarian people would tolerate such measures, or would this prove to be a bridge too far? I do think that Hungary will fall into line on this. Well, they don't really have much choice in the matter, because this is going to be an EU-wide policy. I mean, all these things like the Digital Services Act, that's EU-wide policy. The various demands to bring the social media under control, that's going to be an EU-wide. This is EU-wide regulation, and then getting into the encrypted chats, which is clearly where von der Leyen and the rest of them are going. That's going to be an EU-wide policy, as well as, of course, the general insistence on digital ID controls on how to get into on social media. So all that, I think, is going to be EU-wide policy, and Hungary will go along with it. And there's no reason why Magyar would balk at that. I think he's perfectly fine with it. I mean, he's a part of the EU apparat in the way that Viktor Orban wasn't. Viktor Orban just detested the EU, detested the entire Brussels bureaucracy, the Brussels leadership. So Hungary just simply didn't enforce EU regulations. I mean, it did to a certain extent. I mean, he did go along with sanctions policies on Russia, but with carve-outs for Hungary. But he generally, he went along with those things that he didn't think was worth fighting. But on things that were really mattered to Hungary, Orban balked on. If one thinks about what Magyar's government is all about, he is trying to extract as much money as he can from the EU, and the EU knows this, and the EU is dangling this money in front of him, and they're saying, "Hey, you really have to play ball with us." we're not just going to give you this 30 billion euros that you would like, unless you really do as we say. And I think that's going to be an easy one to do it on issues of online speech. He doesn't like. Magyar. He doesn't care about free speech. I mean, this is a person who's kicking out Hungary's president. This is a person who is preventing his predecessor's prime minister from returning to office. He's preventing his political opponents from running for re-election. So he doesn't care about freedom. He doesn't care about democracy. He does know that his political fortunes are tied up with extracting money from Brussels. If Because if Brussels doesn't give him any money, then I think he's going to be in trouble in the elections in 4 years' time. So, as part of his program has been to remove the various price caps and subsidies that were introduced by Orban. That's one of the things that EU wants from him. So therefore, prices are going to go up quite sharply in Hungary. Hungarians aren't going to like that. So the only way he can sweeten the pot is to extract money from Brussels. That's why he needs to keep in with Brussels. He needs to make them happy. So I think the online speech, I don't think he's going to put up any resistance. Where it is interesting, where he might put up resistance, is I think on the issue of the LGBTQ plus situation, because that's one of the complaints that the EU had leveled against Orban, saying, "Hey, what about this? The legislation that prevented LGBTQ propaganda in public schools, that prevented anything that promoted LGBTQ agenda on public television, all of which is the EU was enraged about." So that legislation that was adopted by Fidesz, that's still on the books. And so the question then is, Brussels will demand that Hungary rescind that legislation. Whether that succeeds, whether Magyar really will go down that path, rescind that legislation, because then Hungarians might seriously object to that. They're saying, "Hey, we don't like the LGBTQ agenda." That I think is going to be quite a difficult one. But I think on everything else, I think he's going to go along with Brussels. And then with the migration pact, he'll find a way to worm his way in, and some compromise whereby he signs on to the migration pact, but no one will notice the effects of it. But on the question of online freedom, I think he'll go with it. I don't think he's gonna. That's not the hill he's gonna die on. Anyway, thank you so much, Aubergine. Thank you for your generosity. And here we have Anne Marie. Always very good to see you, Anne Marie. A renowned musician, a musical expert, musical practitioner, a distinguished violinist, and who here at the Gaggle always very generously provides us with information and insights and vivid descriptions of the life of a classical musician playing at the highest level, playing with the most eminent musicians and orchestras in the world. It's a world I'm in awe of. I'm just the consumer of it, but so I'm in awe of the producers, the creators, as Anne Marie is. So, here we as Gagglers are always very fortunate to enjoy Anne Marie's comments and descriptions of her experiences of of playing very difficult pieces of music. And so we really appreciate Anne Marie, many very generous gestures here at the Gaggle. Thank you so much. And then Robert, good to see you, Robert. And Robert says, the striking things about British social media policing, oh God, is that the encounter itself seems to be the punishment. Around 12,000 arrests produced only about 1,100 sentencing. Yet the knock at the door, interview, custody, seized devices, legal expense, and public humiliation all occur before any court tests the case. The message is clear: even without convictions, expressing the wrong opinion may bring the police to your home. The process is the punishment. I think that's a very good point. That is really very, very insightful, because what that does, what the threat of police coming to your door, and you start getting interrogated, and they do hold you in. They arrest you. They take you down to the police station. It's a very unpleasant experience. As when I got arrested I wasn't arrested, but I was detained at Heathrow. It is an extremely unpleasant experience, and that serves as a deterrent. And that's really the point. Is that if once you're afraid that, the police might come knocking on my door, in the really humiliating circumstance in the middle of the night or whatever, all your neighbors can see what's going on. Once you're afraid of that, once you think, hey, I'm now going to be sucked into this criminal process, then I'm going to be interrogated, I'm going to be fingerprinted, then maybe who knows, there'll be a legal process. People are going to be very wary of making social media postings, and that's the whole point. Everyone becomes afraid of expressing their views because the police might come knocking at your door. And I think that's the whole point. So when you say the process is the punishment, yeah, the process is the punishment, but the process serves as the deterrent. Nobody wants to go through that. I mean, these people come knocking on your door asking these stupid questions, and of course you want to tell them, hey, you're a complete idiot, get out of my house. But you're not able to do so because they're the police. And if you say that you're an idiot, get out of my house, then of course you'll be arrested, and you'll be saying, well, you were resisting arrest, so now you've committed a criminal offense. So that's what the whole point of what of the two-tier Kiers policy is about. And now, I do want to emphasize that while we have a lot of fun with two-tier Kier, at the same time, this policy has been going on long before Keir Starmer. It continued under the Tories. Everything was the worst things, the worst aspects of this policing, the kind of disgusting policing that we saw in the case of the Henry Novak. That policing were the policy that they were pursuing, this anti-racist policy, that was instituted by the Conservative government. The Conservatives were responsible for that. So all these arrests for Facebook posts, that's all under the Tories. So that's, it's nice to think that, it's a two-tier Keir, and now two tiers gone, and things are going to be much better. They're not going to be better. Andy Burnham is going to be exactly the same. And the Tories are going to be exactly the same. This is a bipartisan policy of controlling speech, controlling thought. And I think there's no more effective way of controlling thought than terrifying people. That, hey, who the hell wants the police coming knocking at their door? And that's exactly what they're doing. It's actually a very crafty policy. Anyway, thank you so much, Robert. And Dan Rock says, George, I've just purchased To Kill a Nation from Michael Parenti. Have you read it? I was meaning to read this years ago. Yeah, I have read it. It's a very good book. And I have it here somewhere. And it's one of the first, so it was written already a while ago. And so, it's enjoyable. But obviously, a lot has happened since then, and there were a lot of things that he was unable to take into account because he wrote this in around, I think, 2000. So it was already after the NATO bombing campaign. So I think it was 2000 or 2001. So if you want a more thorough account of the destruction of Yugoslavia, then please read my book, Bombs for Peace: NATO's Humanitarian War in Yugoslavia, because that's a more recent book than Michael Parenti's book. But certainly it was one of the best of the early books about Yugoslavia. Well written, very, vividly done. So yeah, so I can do nothing but recommend it. But if you want to, I think the longer, more thorough, more comprehensive account, and a more up-to-date account, then read my book, Bombs for Peace: NATO's Humanitarian War on Yugoslavia. Anyway, and then Robert says, exactly, anybody who knows the first thing about Serbia knows that the popular national drink is rakia. Exactly. I've got a few of those bottles lying around in my house. So you're absolutely right. They graciously offer it to you anywhere on any occasion. You're absolutely right. It's a delicious drink. And that's why, and that Naumann just added this as a detail. No one asked him. It's like, hey, General Naumann, what were you drinking that evening when you were meeting Milosevic? No one asked him that question. He volunteered that information. And that's how you know it was a lie, because that's what liars do. Liars always add some vivid detail which they think will give credence to their story. Oh, it has to be true because he put this little detail in, because he doesn't, Naumann didn't know. I mean, always in the Balkans, what do they drink in the Balkans? Oh, they drink Slivovitz. He doesn't know. They drink Slivovitz. Oh, he offered us Slivovitz. And also said, I never drink Slivovitz. That's like, I mean, it's called pear brandy, but you're absolutely right. It was basically it was rakia. So yeah, Rob, yeah, that's right. And the funny thing was that scene, which I thought was a quite remarkable scene, and Naumann, I think, was made to look a fool. The media completely messed it up and said, oh, or it showed the triviality of Milosevic's mind, that he made a big deal out of the fact that he served pear brandy rather than Slivovitz. No, that wasn't the issue. The media, New York Times, deliberately missed the issue. Issue isn't, oh, he got this confused. It's that he volunteered a piece of information that was obviously ridiculously false. And that proved that essentially he just made this stuff up, which even common sense would have said, well, of course he made it up. Milosevic was a very smart guy. Anybody could see what a smart guy. Really? He's going to reveal to his two enemies, Klaus Naumann and Wesley Clark, he's going to reveal to them that, oh, yeah, I intend to ethnically cleanse Kosovo. Yeah, I intend to do that. Yeah. These are the people that you're going to reveal this to. That's the quality of the ICTY. And anyway, so then Danrock says the Serbs were ethnically cleansed from Kosovo and Croatia. Absolutely right. No one in the West ever mentions this. Correct, completely correct. And one also has to remember that Operation Storm, which led to this massive ethnic cleansing of the Serbs from Croatia, was supported by NATO. And by supported, I mean NATO actually took part in Operation Storm. So in other words, NATO took part in the operation that led to this massive ethnic cleansing of the Serbs. Some 200,000 Serbs were ethnically cleansed from Croatia in an operation that was enjoyed NATO participation. Yeah. So, and then then Danrock says, please, George, the English, not the British. Scots are more humble and accept their inevitable defeats. Yeah, I yes, I think you have a point there in that the Scots, I think, don't see themselves as a major footballing power. The problem was that England won the World Cup in 1966, and that went to their head. And really, for 60 years since that victory, they've been expecting to win. This is going to be the one. This is going to be the World Cup. We're going to finally lift the trophy again. So we go through this every 4 years. The English go through this expectation that they're going to win it. Scotland never won it, so Scotland, yeah, they don't expect to win it. But the English absolutely believed that this was their year. They were absolutely going to win this, and that's why they're so enraged by this loss. As I said, Argentina thoroughly deserved that win. I mean, this is how you play football. You know, it's settled in the last 5 minutes. I mean, anyone who knows football knows, yeah, it is settled in the last 5 minutes. It's a 95, 100-minute game, counting extra time. So you need to be physically fit and ready, and right up to the 100th minute. And England weren't. England obviously were just spent. They didn't have enough in the tank when Argentina applied the pressure. That's how Argentina plays the game. England wasn't. England thoroughly deserved the defeat. But now, of course, the hysteria, the media just going absolutely crazy. But not just the media, everyone else, and turning on Tuchel, who I think is a very good coach. The somehow and I always love it when everybody suddenly becomes an expert manager. Yeah, I would have done this. I would have brought this player on, and I would have taken over, as if any of them had ever done anything, beyond, if at best, coaching, a primary school football team, and then, like, oh, that provides you with this expertise to know how to coach at the highest level of football. But that's why it's this awful thing of every 4 years. Oh, this is it. We're finally going to retake the World Cup. We've been waiting 60 years to win it. Anyway, thank you so much, Dan Rock. And then NKMRD says, in the last 3 cycles, we are not even part of the club anymore. It's a disaster. Luckily, everything's a disaster nowadays. Nobody notices much. Okay. Anyway, I must say, Cynthia's question in the other stream still keeps me up at night. Why are people not protesting anymore? I know a lot of reasons, but it's still historically little effort. Little efforts. And then Dan Rock says, I second George. I appreciate your comments. Night of the Hunt is a superb movie. Mitchum at his best. And then Dan Rock says, NKMRD, you're still doing better than Italy. Italy didn't even make it, which is quite humiliating because Italy has won the World Cup, I think, Italy has won it 4 times. So Brazil has won it 5 times. Italy has won it 4 times. And I think Germany has won it 3 times. So Italy was quite pathetic for a country that has won the World Cup 4 times. Not to qualify for the knockout stages is, I think, is quite humiliating. And Dan Rock says, I already read your book and I'm a proud owner of a copy. So thank you so much, Dan Rock. I really appreciate that. And then that's anyway. Now to go back to NKMRD's question, why are people not protesting anymore? I know a lot of reasons, but it's still historically. It's a very good question. I mean, I think people protest when they are in serious pain, and I think if you're not in serious pain, you're not going to protest. And so far, this war hasn't People aren't hurting. If, however, things go south and people start getting killed, and then once people start getting killed, they think, we, you might be next. Then I think there will be protests. But ultimately, see, why were there protests in Vietnam? Well, because it looks like, I think, okay. What? Yeah. Why were there protests in Vietnam? Well, because there was conscription. People were being sent. Young men were being sent to Vietnam, and they were getting killed. Nobody wanted to go and get killed in Vietnam. Understandable, but that's why there were protests. Um, People aren't getting sent to get killed in Iran as yet. This could change, but as yet, no one's getting sent to kill, and the economy isn't, doing that badly. So I think it's really, people protest when they're in real pain, when they're afraid and they're losing, then they protest. Otherwise, why protest? There's football to watch. Some latest HBO series. There's always something else to do. Rather than go out in the streets and protest. Anyway, my time is up. So thank you very much, everybody who joined me. Thank you so much for all of your questions and comments. Thank you above all to everybody who put something into the tip jar. I know the dogs are going to be getting up soon, and they're going to be checking the tip jar and then making their very disgruntled noises, as they always do. But that's, then they take it out on me. But that's my lot in life. So thank you so much. We'll do some more podcasts over the weekend, and then on Monday we do the joint live stream with Peter, and then next Tuesday I'm going to do my solo live stream on Tuesday, same time. Hope to see you then. Have a great weekend. All the best. Bye bye.